Again, welcome everyone to Research Bookmark Engaging Stakeholder. This is our first webinar of the year, so Happy New Year's. If you haven't seen us for a while, we are back. We did not even take December off with the Skill Shop, and we're back with our first webinar of the year. To kind of walk into what we're about to do today, can we see the schedule? So our schedule is pretty simple. So our schedule is pretty simple today. We'll do some introductions. You'll get to meet the speakers. They'll introduce themselves. We'll go through a little skit that's going to jump us into the content, today's content. And then I'll lead a small panel discussion, but really our speakers are really sharing their knowledge. I'm just there kind of redirecting questions and so forth. Cav will give us a demo of our new version that was just launched this week. Shout out to the dev team for pushing out our new version. And then we'll do some Q&A where the speakers will be able to take your questions and give you a little more as well. So welcome to Research Bookmark. We are a knowledge base, a search engine for the UX professional. We have seen a tremendous growth in the community, and we build our platform to really power the community, power each individual researcher in their practice and teams as well. This year, kind of looking back on what we've done, we came up with the theme Verum Percentium, which is Latin for truth through knowledge. We are trying to get to truth in our work, or a version of that truth, it may be, but it comes through knowledge. And we know knowledge is a source of equality, it creates freedom, and it creates a creative spirit in all we all do. So again, welcome to our house, and this is Research Bookmark. Let's kick it off. Next. Today, we have three fantastic speakers. My name is Yara Dentor. I'm the founder of Research Bookmark. With a fantastic team behind me, I'm only the founder in name. The people really working and building these things are all behind the scenes, and I'm glad to represent them here as well. So today we have Valerie from Klaviyo. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves. Theo from Microsoft and Marilee from Northern Trust. And we can start introduction with Valerie.
Hey everyone, again, so honored that to be in the room with all of you from across the globe. I am Valerie. I currently work as a senior design researcher at Klaviyo. I think today on the panel, you can probably rely on me for some of the more, I guess I would say, rapidly developing professional. I know, like, I've worked with Marilee before, and she is someone I continue to learn from to this day. So I'm actually excited to hear some of the things she has to say. But I think I'm very much have an affinity with all of you in the audience. Transitioned, studied HCI, and then found myself in the research field. And I hope that I can offer something of value to those of you who are making that pivot.
Surely. Thank you, Valerie. Theo?
Hey everybody, I'm Theo. I work at Microsoft as a senior design researcher. Currently working on like enterprise products, B2B, right? A lot of conversations about working with stakeholders, right? So in my environment, I think the questions and the answers I can give to people today, just in general, and the knowledge is going to be beneficial, because when you're doing a lot of internal research, sometimes a product manager is a stakeholder, right? So it's going to be really nice to kind of share knowledge to everybody and what's it like working in that B2B space. I worked at a bunch of different tech companies. I've worked at Sony Music Entertainment. I've worked at Apple, right? I've worked at Meyer, which is e-commerce. So I've been able to kind of work in a variety of different sectors. I also have a background in HCI, master's in human computer interaction. I've done some work in VR and AR. I'm really passionate about research. I'm really hoping that the stuff that we can share today is going to help you guys, right? This is all just great knowledge, and I'm really grateful to be here today.
Thank you. Marilee, up to you.
Sure. And I'm Marilee, and I am head of design for asset servicing at Northern Trust Bank, which is basically designed for financial experiences. I come from a kind of a different background than either Valerie or Theo. I came to this work via a design degree, a traditional design experience, and learned research through graduate school. And so I'm coming at the whole experience from a slightly different perspective. But I've worked as an independent individual contributor and a freelance designer and researcher for numbers of years. And now I find myself in charge of a team, which who knew? I didn't actually know that was going to be in my future. I'd been a manager before. I didn't really think I wanted to do it again, but all of a sudden I find myself in a position where I am the face of the team to our stakeholders, and I get involved at the very front end of research and design engagements, mostly discovery type of research engagements right now. Oh, look at all those hands clapping. Isn't that nice? And so I think what I'll be able to bring to the discussion today is lots of experience doing research in the trenches and doing the design, working on the design that happens after. But also particularly because of what I'm doing now, lots of ideas and thoughts about, exactly what the topic of this talk is today, getting stakeholders involved and why, and when is it right? When is it not right? Sometimes you actually don't want them involved. If they're not they don't have the right mindset, you may not really want them to be in there, but we can talk more about that. But I'm just excited to be here and honored to be in a meeting with hundreds of people from around the world. I'm kind of verklempt.
Thank you so much. And I want everyone to kind of note something here in the thread and the background that these our speakers come from. So you see ACI, you see design, people come from law, healthcare, human experience, user experience has created this melting pot of culture and people and intelligence that we have not yet quite seen in a field before. So it's to embrace, and it's really going to help the world move in a better future. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is do a quick skit. Me and Marilee are going to jump into a skit where a stakeholder and a UX researcher are having a very preliminary conversation, trying to understand each other, trying to get on the right path, right? So let me give you a little background. So I'm the stakeholder at a company called Genius Wear. We specialize in wearable technology for an aging population, and we're trying to improve their quality of life and independence. And their flagship product is a smartwatch right now, and it does various things. So where does a challenge or the problem come in? Things seem to be going all right. Currently, the company has seen an opening in what AI has been doing, in advancement of AI, and wanting to include a true 360 AI system into the wearables. Not something reactive where you ask it something, not Siri, right? Something proactive. When to wake up? Should I cook for you? Should I call for you? And so forth, right? Things that are really involved in helping making people's lives better. So this kit is around this. So keep that in mind as we're going through. Keep notes in your head because that's going to roll right into our questions and conversations. So let's get started. Here's Marilee and I in a Zoom call or in a conference room, and she cornered me because things are moving a little fast, and here we are. What's going on, right?
Yeah, I'm so glad we had a chance to sit down and talk briefly. I won't take a ton of your time, but I do have a few questions I wanted to kind of explore with you. We're starting to get a little traction. The team is coming together. I know you've had your team getting pulled together around this project, but there's still a few things that are kind of ambiguous that unless we kind of solve it or kind of, plot them out now, I think it's going to, make some problems in the future. So if I could just pick your brain for a bit, just a few minutes around a few subjects, that would be great. Is that okay with you?
I have about 5 minutes, so let's talk really quick.
That's all I know. So the first question I really have is, I'm excited about this technology, but have you have you seen among all of your current users, have you noticed any kind of particular friction or opportunity for this new technology? Is there a problem we're trying to solve?
Well, we've looked at the data and we've seen also in the market that a lot of companies are doing this. We don't want to fall behind, right? We don't want to fall behind. We know, people have issues returning our products sometimes because, the latches break and stuff, and those are, physical things. But we don't want to fall behind in the technology. So when we did our last market research and it came back and said, hey, all of our competitors are moving into this space, we want to be there too.
Good. So that tells me a little bit more about what we're really trying to do, which is more about opportunity finding. So, I think what we'll probably want to do is approach this research in a slightly different way than I originally thought, because it sounds like it's really much more sort of a lot more ambiguity and a little bit more, we think there's an opportunity out there. So I'm gonna suggest that we kind of take an approach that's a little bit broader than we normally would. So we might want to go into doing some kind of foundational things around mental models and focus on the population, the elderly population, maybe the sort of young to middle elderly population, and build a research plan around that. Does that feel right to you?
Well, how long is that going to take? I don't know what mental models are. It sounds like something that's going to take too long. And, we really want to go into our next investor meeting with, this prototypes and bring the company. So how long are all this stuff going to take?
Well, I think we can probably chunk this research out in short sort of sprints. I like to try to work in a 6 to 8 week model where we can define a certain objective that we'll try and achieve by that 8 weeks. And then we can kind of Lego block them together. We might have 4 or 5 research questions we might want to kind of explore initially, but we could get a start on the first 8 week module, see what we learn, and then pivot where we need to. We may learn so much that we would be able to get started creating some initial directional prototypes that might be helpful in terms of you actually reporting out to your shareholders or to your executive team, kind of what's going on and where are we going with this. That will also help you, I think, get an idea of what kind of cost this might be, and help you build the case for getting your funding for the actual build out. Ultimately, I think this first phase is really about helping to build the business case, but it isn't directly, I want to just be clear, it's not really directly, we're going to end up with a prototype we can build. It's going to be more about uncovering what these users really need. Does that sound workable?
Yeah, I got to tell you, we already had a prototype from a company we outsourced from. And
Yeah.
they brought in something really cool, and the leadership really loved it. So do we really need to go through this process again, or can we just show that to our investors and then go from there?
Sure, I hear you. Can you tell me what kind of research was done before that prototype was created? What was actually known and learned about the audience or the customer for this?
Yeah, I wasn't sure. We saw it's a company on LinkedIn advertising their new AI tech that can be
Okay.
included, and
Okay.
our
You know what? That's something that's interesting, and we could use that prototype perhaps as sort of a straw man, and we could, as one part of the research engagement, we could put that prototype in front of folks and then ask a series of questions and maybe ask them to interact with the prototype in some way that will help us understand where that prototype is actually serving needs and where it's not serving needs. That'll help us understand not only what's good or bad about that particular concept, that's actually not the most valuable thing we might learn, but what we could learn is really what's really behind what these users really need. That we'll be able to elicit stories that give us a deeper understanding of what they really need, and that will help us build a better prototype.
You said we can get this done in quicker chunks, and you mentioned also 8 weeks. So
Mhm.
when can I expect some deliverables? And I know this is just I have to go in a few minutes, and this is just our first
Yeah.
conversation. When can we expect some deliverables?
Well, if you can give me an idea of some of the milestones that you're trying to hit, and also particularly what the budget you have is, and if it matters where the funding is coming from, because all of those things kind of matter in terms of us putting together a plan. I can go and do that in a vacuum, but it's not going to mean much if it doesn't kind of fit with the context you're in and serve your needs. But, as I said before, first thing we really want to do is support that business case that you're trying to build, and then we go from there. So if you can think about it as chunks, 4 to 8 week chunks of research, rather than a long extended period of research, then we can sort of pivot and evolve our thinking as we go. And in that way, it may be possible to bring some of your stakeholders into the research process as well. And by the way, could you give me an idea of who they are? Because that way I'll be able to understand how to kind of weave them in.
Yeah, I'm thinking now, and we should probably connect you with the company that built this prototype, and
Yeah.
also our business development leader, Frank, who's really adept at like going and doing market research for us and knowing where we need to go. I have
Do
to
you have a
jump.
CS person as well? Do you have someone involved in customer experience as well? They would be good to have on the team as well, because they might have access to data that would help us kind of refine the plan.
Wow. There's a department that I don't really deal with it, but I can put you in contact with those folks as well. And
Okay.
in classic fashion, Zoom fashion, I have another Zoom meeting that I need to get to, and action is set, and then we'll close the skit there.
Well, it was so nice to meet you. It was so nice to meet you, Yao, and I look forward to the project.
Look forward to working with you as well. Thank you so much, Marilee. That was great.
Yeah.
That was great. I know I took you a couple of different directions.
Okay.
All very real, though.
Before.
All very real.
Yeah, this is what we encounter. Again, welcome to engaging with stakeholders, and let's get right in, right? So define a stakeholder in your day-to-day environment, and we're going to start with Theo here. Theo works in B2B, and he's working many different fields, and stakeholder, that word itself can be very dangerous, right, in the way we use it. So what is a stakeholder in your day-to-day environment, Theo?
Yeah, so stakeholder can be a variety of different people, I've noticed, right? So on my team at Microsoft, right, we're on a small team, right? We go and execute and help a bunch of variety of different product managers. Now, each product manager owns a product, and they have massive impact and big value on what we're doing, right? So let's say that, our team is like, okay, we want you to work on this portal, right? We're redesigning this entire portal. The owner of that portal of that area would be our stakeholder, right? Engaging with them, right? And at Microsoft, we're actually trying to teach new research practice, teach the new experience design, get away from legacy thinking, trying to incorporate new practices and research, right? Now, other stakeholders can be like our GM, right, who is way above, right, making sure that we're doing the right job, making sure that the research we're doing is on par to our business needs and, also to our user needs, right? And looking at it from a B2B perspective, also it's people that work at Microsoft, but also partners, someone that like buys Microsoft product from us, right? They're a partner of Microsoft, right? How can we make that process great for them, not just from the business side, but also from the support side, the design side, everything, and you name it, that holistic process, right? When you look at the stakeholders, you kind of got to measure, right? With our team, we're like, okay, we have X stakeholder one, who is this person, this portal, this one could be, for payments, right? There's all these different areas, but each stakeholder, right, might work a little bit different. They might have specific needs. So it's like trying to figure out how to cater to that stakeholder and making sure that you're meeting their needs and making sure you're executing the right work at the right time.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned a few key terms there, and I'm going to jump to Valerie to answer this question as well. But B2B is business to business. I actually got this question in class yesterday when I was teaching. So some folks don't, B2B, B2C, and so forth, customer to customer. There's terms, right? Use our vocabulary page on Research Bookmark to kind of get familiar with some of these terms. Valerie, how about you? Who's a stakeholder in your e-commerce world?
Yeah, I think you can't stop. You could, walk a few feet and trip, and there's a stakeholder. We have stakeholders everywhere. And it's great because it just means that there are that many people who are invested in seeing a successful outcome for something that is new and is meant to bring value to the organization. I think that there are, like at least at Klaviyo, there are a wide scale of projects from, things that are more focused on maintaining the quality of the product, and there are things that are net new experiences. And that can also change the face of your stakeholders as well. You can even have stakeholders sort of built into how your teams are structured. So our organization has pods that are aligned to different parts of the product. So you might find that your stakeholders are like you're just like you're in the trenches. These are your day in, day out homies. You guys have stand-ups together. You go through design reviews together. You guys have a lot of very informative experiences as a group. In my role, I actually float across a couple of different teams. So my stakeholders do shift and change. I encounter, familiar faces, and I encounter new ones. And I think that can be any combination of designers, PMs, other researchers, voice of customer teams, sales and marketing. And depending on the scale and the visibility of the project, that can add stakeholders as well. So for me, I think I have a very broad definition of stakeholder, and it's not so much a dangerous term, at least in our organization. I think our organization emphasizes ownership as a concept. So I think that people do want to think of themselves as owners of new experiences that are coming to light.
Oh, there's so many juicy things to jump into here. So I'm going to take a different angle, Marilee, on this question. So you mentioned stakeholders that are sometimes not in your company, right? And that can get tricky when you're working with partners. Tell me a bit about that experience. When you find stakeholders that are outside, how do you communicate with them, right? And things can get gray, obviously, if there's an NDA signed and you're working together, but how do you reach out to stakeholders that are not part of your company?
Well, that never happens at Northern Trust, where I am right now. Being in a bank, we focus on partner experience, the internal teams that are working on behalf of our customers or clients, and then there's client experience. And I haven't had an opportunity to work with a stakeholder outside of the organization, other than peripherally with a vendor who is providing some kind of design or development help for our team. But those are not the kind of stakeholders that can influence the direction of the work. They're really doing execution. However, at my previous job at HCSC, where I worked with Val, there were sometimes stakeholders who were the employees of our clients. And they were stakeholders because they were actually the end user of some of the experiences that we created. And that was interesting because they represented a group that, of course, as a stakeholder group, as users, they're stakeholders, but they were people we really wanted to get to, and they were really hard for us to get to because there were contractual obligations that prevented us from reaching out to them directly because they were not our clients. Their employers were our clients. HCSC is a company that owns Blue Cross Blue Shield health insurance companies in 5 different states. So we were insuring their employees, but we were not allowed to talk to them. So that was the biggest challenge. And recruiting them for research was the enormous challenge when I was working on right up to the time I left. So that's kind of I didn't fully crack that code yet, but getting around the contractual obligations was something that I thought about a lot. Because it was very hard to find those folks from a general population. We could try and recruit them from a general population, but our ask was usually pretty specific, and it's really hard to find them that way.
Great. I'm going to touch up on 2 things here. One is a thread that we hear on there are various stakeholders in every organization. 2, Marilee brought something up that is interesting, where stakeholders become your research partners, your research subjects, your users, in a way where that increases the complexity of the relationship. They're both stakeholders, but you need them as also research participants. And we can talk about that all day, just that, because coming from, I work for the government, and coming from that, I feel exactly where you are. So let's jump into a bit of process here. What is the typical process engaging stakeholders in your day as a researcher? And this is, in today's day, how do you engage with this fast-paced movement that we are? People are working from home, we're on Zoom. How do you engage with Valerie? Let's start with you.
Yeah, so I think not being aligned to a pod in particular, I've found a home in some of the pods that I'm not like technically assigned to. So I attend stand-ups. And then for more cross-functional projects, there are meetings where folks get together to talk about the projects more broadly. In between things like that, you know, we make use of the tools that we have at our disposal. We do have a lot of Slack threads and channels where we can talk to one another. I also do have one-on-ones with some PMs that I work with and some designers, depending on what phase we're in the project. I think that I want to just sort of speak about a little bit about working at HCSC. And I think that something that I know now working at Klaviyo is that, like, you know, you're as far as product is concerned, they're really up front and center. Like, you guys are riding on in the same seat on the school bus. I feel like at HCSC, I always felt like product was like way over yonder in the land beyond. And it was even just like a psychological trip just to even walk over there to ask a question. It was very much like design and research. You guys are buddies. And you guys are going to work together to suss out the user need. You're going to work together to suss out how, you know, things are going to be designed. And then we're going to sell it to the business. And it was never sort of that kind. And so once it's sold to the business, then we can bring product in, because now it makes sense, because now we're going to build something versus, you know, product. And then product comes in and they're like rightfully like, okay, what's going on here? So I think that like these different environments can structure how you choose to engage. But I think if I could give myself advice, like back then, I would, you know, probably say it's okay. Like, they're not going to bite you. They're not even going to be mean. They probably don't know what's going on over there. And that's probably 98% of the battle is we don't actually know what you guys are doing. And now you've come to us with this prototype and you're telling us to task engineering teams to build it. Like, okay. So I think that's something I would probably want to action on if I could go back like 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. The process can. This process leverages obviously the company's own ethos on how they run, right? How open they are, how engaging people are as well. Marilee, let's talk to you about that. Typical process, was there an existing process before you got to Northern Trust, and did you improve it or did you build it yourself?
You know, I don't know the answer to that. I started there about 6 months ago. I'm still learning about the company. But I never think about that anyway, because I always think about, well, what's going to work for me? And until someone tells me I can't do it that way, I keep going. So I think, but what I'd like to say about process is for me in the role that I'm in, and it affects my team, from the researchers to the designers, and then ultimately to the developers who are not on my team, they're in the tech group. They're sort of two ends of the process that really need attention, and that we as the research team can really affect. One is understanding who the stakeholders are upstream, where our interests align. So part of my process is to map out the stakeholders at the beginning of a project, identify who is the project owner, who is the project sponsor, you know, who has a real stake in this, and what their real objective is. And does that objective map to some kind of larger strategic goal that the company has assigned? So we sort of work that all out up front. But then when you really get down to it, the process that we follow, another one of our stakers, I believe, is my partners in the design team. So my job, I think, as leader for the research team, is to do my research and document my research in a way that creates continuity between the research team, the design team, the development team. So at every end of the stakeholder spectrum, from the folks outside of our team, the executives who are paying for the work, all the way down to the developers who are going to build the work, there's continuity there. So everyone understands what the strategic objective is. Everyone understands what the technology constraints are, and the information flows back and forth. So that's my process, to try and smooth that out.
She spoke like a true leader, right? The continuity part is so key, right? If you build something where people are, you know, can't follow up the work or can't plan, it's very horrendous to be in that kind of environment. So your teams are
all the time. You know,
Yeah.
we didn't know about this. We didn't know about that. You know, why did you design something we can't build? You know, I don't know, you know, I don't know why I'm doing it this way. I don't know what the user needs. Well, if you let that information trickle down, the whole ladder
Yeah.
goes better.
Yeah, what about you? What is the process here that you use?
For engaging stakeholders, yeah, I mean, so at Microsoft, right, I'm kind of embedded, kind of similar to what Valerie was saying. She has like her pods, right? I work for a variety of different teams, but each different PM, they have stand-ups, they have weekly meetings, they have some bi-weekly meetings, we even have some monthly meetings, and we have like quarterly meetings, right? So, you know, how do we approach this in a way where it's going to be effective long term with all these different teams, right? So there is some ad hocing going around too. I mean, I'll do a project, I'll be really, really involved with the stakeholder in the beginning, kind of, you know, kind of what Marilee said, is identifying those stakeholders, who is going to be impactful, how are we going to know and understand, you know, who's working with what and like what that value means to the business. Now, but when all that's mapped out, when we kind of start our new research program or initiative or whatever we're working on, we kind of go and be like, okay, we coordinate everything, right? So for instance, a day in the life of Theo, right? I'll have one meeting with a week, you know, with that stakeholder, with the team, and then we have another meeting with another team, another meeting with another team, right? So I'm in these meetings, but they're all kind of syncs. Hey, this is what's going on. This is where we're at. You know, how can we move forward, etc. Right? Testing phases, right? Let's say we're in the middle of a big study, like recently did this huge study on personas, right? Really, really intriguing study, measuring who's in what tool, right? Stakeholders got really engaged in that because now they have an understanding, right, of who's in what tool, you know, what are those demographics like and how can we make the product better, right? Once we brought that value and really gained the trust to the stakeholder, they wanted to be in, they wanted to sit in some of our workshops or see some of our designs and to just be really involved, right? And then teaching them UX research along the way. So with my role, it's kind of like you go in, you work with the stakeholders, and I'm doing a lot of ad hoc. Like I'll message, hey, I got this update, blah, 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 you know, testing's going well. We had 6 users today, blah, 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 right? Kind of go from there. Oh, great, Theo, thanks for the check-in. So I have worked at orgs where we don't want that. They just kind of like, you know, it's like the stakeholders are very busy. There's no ad hoc. You kind of do your thing. They don't want you to be sitting there messaging them, right? So, you know, for instance, when I was working at Sony as a lead, I know earlier you mentioned, you know, testing with larger, you know, audience like stakeholders, right? I was testing SVPs, long sessions, right? So making sure they had a voice and say, I'm like, well, this is a pretty big impact, you know, hopefully the stuff we're doing, right? And the impact and the all the stuff they say, we better have feedback and push that for design and work closely with all the different product teams, right? So just, you know, really interesting here at Microsoft. I know there are different teams that do things differently, but, you know, I really like to make sure the goals for research are aligned for all of the stakeholders. And that way things are smooth. There isn't some crazy surprise, which does happen, by the way, all the time. Trust me, you know, oh man, this deadline needs to be here. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Right? But being able to approach that in a way where, you know, you're nice to your stakeholder and also understanding, okay, cool, we have this is the resources we do have, leverage what you currently have, right? And right now with the economy, with tough times, right, it's how can we do really, really well with what we currently have without trying to spend X amount of money and making the stakeholder be like, oh man, I don't want to be spending money on lots of stuff we don't need. So a lot of, you know, kind of going on the path and just doing it that way. So that's, hopefully that helps answer the question. So
Yeah, that's great because you can see Valerie and Theo are podsters. I'm going to call you pod because you guys are in pods and you move from, but
Yep.
it's once
Like a pod jumper.
yeah, pod jumpers right here. Because one thing I'm going to say is being a UX researcher, becoming a UX researcher requires you to hold relationships, to be able to hold multiple relationships. I mean, the amount of meeting, the amount of emails from different things, different team needing stuff, it's very much something you have to come to grips with, right? And to be able to jump and help these teams as well. So fantastic answers there that kind of give us insight into each of you roles and then your environments as well. Thank you so much. So let's talk a bit about impact. The time is always so short in these things. I want to make them 2 hours, but I know that we'll keep you forever. Let's talk about impact. How do you know if your research helped a particular stakeholders make better decisions? How do you track it? And this question is really pointing to the big monster in the room is ROI. What is the return of investment on this researcher, this strategist, this designer, right? So let's start with you, Theo. How do you measure that? How do you make sure that's coming through as well?
Yeah, so throughout my different roles for UX research, right, I've kind of done things kind of similar, right, but all depends, right? So looking at it through task completion rates, conversion rates, user satisfaction metrics, analytics, right? Understanding the impact of the research is what we're doing having a value or having positive impact on our users and the business, right? So like kind of measuring that. Let's say you do research, right, for 6 months, and then you kind of do like a post-op and you take a really broad look at what your research was and then to now. Is there more engagement? Did a feature change or something that we made for the user that they really wanted that we put on there create this massive change or large adoption rate increase, right? So stuff like that is really, really important, right? And keeping a tab on these and making sure that, looking at all these metrics and KPIs, or like Microsoft OKRs, objective key results, right? You want to hit those, right? How can we hit those different OKRs and be successful, right? But making sure that everything's in line with our stakeholders. But the impact of research is super important, right? So are we doing the right things, right? Are we testing the wrong things? Are we testing the right things, right? So that, like, I know earlier, Marilee was really harping on, okay, in the beginning and in the skit, you're talking about the discovery research, making sure up front everything is set for success early is going to help in the end. And then you have all these different metrics, the quantitative stuff, the surveys, right? Interacting with your customers, right? So like, for instance, when I was at Meijer, put out a lot of surveys, people going to grocery stores, right? They use the Meijer mobile app, right? How we measure that from the beginning to the end, right? We implement a new feature, right? Oh, how is this feature, right? Just throwing this out there, but again, right? It's just like those small little things can show impact. And then, for instance, let's say you have a meeting with the stakeholder, right? You're like, oh, well, we really want to know how this X feature is doing or the product is doing. Well, guess what? We did research, we did this usability test, then we got the feedback from the research and design team, we implemented the changes. Here's the results now. This drove usage, this drove the user to do X, Y, and Z. Now they're more interested. Now we have more users, right? So again, right, doing the right research methodology and tackling it the right way can really, really be beneficial and then raise the impact for research. And of course, happy stakeholders, happy life, right? So it's always good.
Yeah. Theo just threw a book at you guys, by the way. It's a whole book. He's going to need to write one day. Let's go to Marilee for this question as well. You being in the spot that you're in, how do you measure? How do you help your teams? Actually, for you, how do you help your teams, right, make sure their work is going into that decision, for the stakeholder?
Yeah. And that's such a good question. And of course, I just want to say it is notoriously difficult to measure quantitatively the impact of the work we do. Let's just be real. It's almost impossible, but a lot of what we do is observable. The outcomes and the impacts are observable. Again, I start sort of upstream. I try to make sure that when we kick off a research project, we have captured not only what the strategic objectives are and how they map to the organization's objectives, we also map out how we're going to measure that. And so it could be a combination of observations, feedback. It could be some quantitative, some measurements as well. But I try to work with my stakeholders. Usually it's the project sponsor, the project owner. What are you going to look for when we finish this work to make an impact immediately? And then ultimately in the product that we build, how is this going to change? What do you expect? What kind of, net change do you expect to see in user behavior or client satisfaction? We try to measure those or articulate those upfront so that everyone on the team understands what the impact might look like if we're doing this well. Secondarily, I think we can tell if, for example, if this is discovery research and funding hasn't been allotted for that product to be developed, well, they use that research to make their business case. And, we could say, potentially, if funding gets granted to that project, well, we probably had some hand in it. So that's another signal. But I do think we're looking at a variety of signals, really, more than evidence, full-on evidence of our impact. I think another thing, though, we can really count on is whether people come back for more work. Do you get repeat business? At HCSC, I was there for about 2.5 years, and I worked for a variety of different groups. I'm not sure, there was only one instance where a group came back for more. And I thought that was kind of interesting. Maybe if I'd been there a little bit longer, it would have happened. But where I am now, I've already had repeat business from a couple of groups, and I've only been there 6 months. So, taking on something and then extending the work, going back and doing more work on it, that's kind of an indication that the work is creating value in some way. And sometimes it creates value that you didn't expect.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Observe, kind of, you can observe when research and design have made impact, and
Yeah.
also these key metrics that change as soon as we introduce new knowledge in, right? Valerie, let's close with you on this question. How do you make sure that work is going into stakeholder decision in your pods?
Yeah, so I think that there are a couple different examples. One was one of my first projects. We were doing mostly usability testing, and we found that one of our key product offerings, had a decent amount of engagement, but we were hearing that a lot of folks were missing key call to action buttons that would enable them to use, the feature itself. And so this was in the category of what you might call low hanging fruit, but it was initially a little bit hard to get this prioritized because stakeholders already kind of had things set in the backlog that, were already getting ready to go out. And so this sort of was like a late, kind of midnight hour addition. Sometimes you get lucky, and I would call this a lucky situation because they were able to tie our recommendation to something that was already slated to go out. And so because of that, we got to see the impact of them, making a stronger call to action button, which increased the number of folks that were able to, engage with this particular offering. So that was a very tactical kind of boom, you see the change in numbers, something that's a little more diffused. And I think to what Marilee was saying, because impact comes in so many forms, I would say slow burn impact is kind of a bigger exploratory study that I did with one of my colleagues, Natalie Scholes, when we were both at Klaviyo together earlier this year, or last year rather. God, 2023 is already here, right? So it was a diary study, and we worked with 15 of our customers, and we hung out with them digitally for about a month, and we learned so many different things, not just about our customers, but the ecosystems that they live in, because it's very easy to get very product and feature focused and then forget that these are whole people with whole lives. I was just on a research call recently, today, where the customer was in the store by themselves, holding down the storefront and doing the interview with me at the same time. So she literally had to pause to sell things. And it was customers in context, this is literally who we're supporting. She is in the store by herself. Of course she has to put me on hold. So anyway, the point being that there are these rich ecosystems that can get lost because we live in the product all day. So we start to think that that's the world, and it's not the world. So with this particular project, we came out with, not new nomenclature, but I would call it supplementary nomenclature to refer to the ecosystems that our customers live in. And that has taken it's taken about a year, but then we've heard recently that, the nice thing is that it's actually found reach outside of the product org within our organization. Other teams are interested in that language because it's a lot richer than describing the size of an organization. Who is this person in the organization? Do they make big decisions? Are they an executor? Are they a planner? Do they have a lot of organizational reach? Are they focused in one area? And so these were some of the questions that we came out of a more bigger research project with that were less tangible boom impact, but more other people are seeing the value in talking about our customers kind of not as these individual endpoints, but these nodes that are part of bigger arenas that we need to keep in mind as we design for them.
Oh, it's always really nice to hear how research changes the vocabulary of a company. And for example, with that, changing what is the environment that our users live in, and having a company adopt that is always great. KPI and ROI, for our team. So let's take a few minutes. We just threw a bunch at you. This is all recorded. Let's take a few minutes. Cav is gonna take us to a 3-minute demo, and we're gonna come back there like 50 questions. So I'm going to be working in the back trying to select some questions, and we'll come back and answer them really quick. So Cav, up to you. If you are speaking, you're mute.
All right. Oops. I'm so sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Cavendish Mwangi, product lead of Research Bookmark. And it's a pleasure to kind of take you guys through product demo to show you guys the few updates that we've been working on. So we've done a bit of a UI revamp on the page to try and bring out more of the resources that we've been putting together. And I'm going to take you guys through and see the collections page, right? So this is sort of like the one thing that sort of built Research Bookmark for the very beginning. So in this collection page, you can find unlimited resources on UX research, spanning from tools, templates, courses, all the way to different articles in different areas. So we are trying to put together articles on the stages of UX research, articles in e-commerce, artificial intelligence, fashion, and typically trying to look for articles that speak on user experience in different areas. Another thing that I want to share with you guys that we built on the platform is something that we call content preview. So instead of opening articles in different tabs, you can actually be able to open an article right on Research Bookmark, and you can be able to go through the content itself without having to move out of the platform. So that sort of saves the time that people take in terms of opening new tabs to read through articles and then deciding to pick on which article they want to go through, right? Something else that I actually want to show you guys is something that we recently launched called the events calendar. So right now it's on 27th. We don't have an event that we've uploaded that is happening today, but you can actually see other upcoming events that are happening. So we have an event happening tomorrow, and we have events running all the way to March. So something I'm going to say about this calendar is it's not only highlighting URB events, but also other UX events that are happening in the UX space. And something I'm going to mention about this specific calendar feature. So using this widget, you can actually be able to see the event that is happening that specific day, right? Something else that I also wanted to bring up is for people who actually love attending our webinars, but maybe you do not have time to attend all the webinars, we've redesigned our webinar page to be able to not only provide information about the events that we are holding, but to enable you to register for the events that we are having, but also have access to the different previous webinars that we've previously held, and also like the webinars that we're currently holding, right? So in the event that you want to have access to a library of all the previous webinars that Research Bookmark has held, this is a page to actually come to and spend your time just, absorbing the knowledge that the different speakers have provided in our webinars. Yes, so that is all I'll take the time to share with you guys today. So take the time to explore the platform and take advantage of all the new features and resources that we have to offer. And if you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I know we went through that pretty fast, but it is always a 24/7, right? It's an etheric world, so you can live in that platform forever. And the things that we've done are from the community. Community votes on our feature, they request features, and then we go and build them, right? We are like meta research. We research researchers and designers, so we really try to listen to our users and the way we build as well. So being a sign up users, you will get to see more collections. We are building collections in very specific themes, e-commerce. We're going to build automobile, fashion, UX in fashion, UX in shoes, UX in whatever. We're going to build every collection possible in the world, and being a sign up user will give you access to all of those collections. So thank you so much. We're going to go into our Q&A, which we have we'll probably do 2 questions, not to keep everyone here too long. One of the questions that are highly rated here is, how do you rebuild trust when things have already gone up to a rocky start with your stakeholders? This is a very good question because it does happen in our natural environments. We're all different. Personalities, goals, intentions don't always match. So how do you rebuild trust? And I'll do a different questions for all of you guys. Let's go with Theo on this one. How do you rebuild trust when things start off on a rocky start with a stakeholder?
Yeah, so it happens. It's like we're all human, right? So you could do something, and do a research methodology or do a research plan and execute on something, and maybe they aren't seeing the results that they want, right? So, and then they're a little funky about it, and they're like, oh man, something's not working out. So, proposing the value, asking, being kind, being like, okay, so what is the concern? What is the concern you're raising? For the whatever issue happened, it could be the process of research, it could be something that's just not working out. Be making sure that you're easing into their wants and needs, right? Because in the end, right, we're trying to execute on business needs, but also our user needs, right? But if our stakeholders aren't liking what the stuff we're doing for research, then that's not a good pivot, right? And not a good way to kind of, for the research team and just the value prop of research, right? So work with them to understand why there's a problem, right? And once you figure that out, right, try to come up with a solution, right? Work with your team, right? How can you take what you have and make it better? Or, hey, we have time. I have time to fit in my schedule to maybe do a little bit more testing or do a little bit more analysis or kind of look at this concept. Again, there's always different scenarios, but to gain that trust back with your stakeholder, right, is just making sure that they're seeing the value prop in the work that you do and being very reflective, right? If you go and you don't talk to them or you ignore them or you don't show them what's going on, well, guess what? It's not going to look good on the research, right? So it's really nice to be reflective and just be kind to them and really sit down and approach them and try to just renegotiate and reorganize all the situation that's happening. That's kind of
that question was from N. Everett. So, and Theo went in and gave you so many areas in which you can help improve that relationship. And there's all the small things that he mentioned, right? Not just one, all those small things. Okay, so there's another interesting question here from, let me see. This question is anonymous. So, as a new hire, how do you ensure to establish good relationships with stakeholders from the start? And I guess I can ask both Valerie and Merrill, because being at your role, you can kind of see how that works. But let's go with Valerie on this. How do you, as a new hire, how would you establish a good relationship? How would you make sure it starts off a good foot?
Yeah, and I can speak to this because that was me maybe about a year and some change ago. Transitioning into Klaviyo. It was really about those meetings. I think when we're in a remote environment, like my answer would vary if I was in an office setting. I did talk about that spatial trepidation, when whole departments dominate an area of an office, it can feel very intimidating to walk over there. And in that case, I would say, again, no human should in a building bite you. So you should feel very confident to go over there and introduce yourself. But I think the remote environment has given us some luxuries in that, you can always Slack people and say, hey, I'm a new researcher. That was something that I think every researcher that's onboarded to our team, that's kind of part of the onboarding checklist. So, even if you weren't inclined to do so, which I would strongly recommend against, you would have this onboarding checklist that's here are people you need to set up meetings with, here are people that you need to talk to. It actually got to a point where our team was having so many one-on-ones, post onboarding, that we were actually told to scale back a little bit, which makes sense. Obviously, researchers do need healthy heads down time, and protect your time, everyone, so you can have that time. But the relationships are very important, and just getting to know people as humans, again, taking that holistic approach. We shouldn't just see our stakeholders as people that we have to get over on so that we can get what we want. They are people that want to work with us. And especially if you're a part of a nascent research team, because I think one thing we haven't really talked about in this discussion is when you're coming into an organization that has an established research team versus one that has one that's growing. And those are two different types of environments to enter into and present yourself in. So, I think that definitely has an impact on how you start off those relationships. It's just like making friends in real life. Like, no, there's no secret chick. Really, it is like you might have a coffee, you might talk about your interests and hobbies. So what are the new projects that you're thinking on? Like, what's your roadmap looking like? It can always go from that wide to specific, just like it would in a session with the customer. So
Very good. So that last point there is so critical. It is just like kind of making friends, and the more natural you take it, you see that people take onto you as well and take to that genuine spirit that you have, and that's where you're gonna make your work much better. So don't leave yet. We have a digital drop for everyone. We're going to do one last question for Marilee to close us out here. So there's a question here because you are a designer and also a researcher. There's a question here from Astrid Bui. How do you communicate to UX designers in this process as a UX researcher? So as you go in and building this relationship with stakeholders, you have partners, you have closer partners, and you have partners around. How do you help these teams, these two kind of side of one coin, in this process of building, relationship with stakeholders and leveraging their knowledge?
Yeah, so in communicating with the UX designers, I try very hard, again, in my upfront sort of setting up of the work, I try very hard to communicate to everyone when I do communicate out what our objectives are with this work. So everyone is aligned on what we're trying to accomplish. And I also try to be very clear about what we've learned. So I use a lot of visuals in our readout decks. We use, very clear, precise language, and we put all of our research documentation in a digestible form in an appendix in the readout. So what happens is we are reading out and we're sharing with stakeholders, but we always have a wide audience. It's not just the stakeholders, it's tech partners, it's designers, it's developers, whoever. We invite a lot of people to these readouts. But then at the end of the day, we take that deck and we share that with the design and development team. And in that deck, in that appendix, there's everything that anyone could possibly need to know about why we're recommending this direction for the design. Sometimes the readouts include directional prototypes that give an idea. We work directly with UX designers on the discovery. They come in at the middle stage of the discovery to help us sort out what's important to what we learned and what would a future look like. So we try to kind of weave them into the upfront as well. But at the end of the day, it really kind of comes down to what's in that deck and does it communicate in a continuous way, in a comprehensive way, what we were really trying to accomplish. So anyone could pick it up and understand what the goals were.
Yeah, and that comes back again, a continuity of the work that we start
Mhm.
as individuals. Really, really love that. In closing here, I want to really thank all our speakers for their time. Valerie is in Ghana. It's crazy times. Theo, Marilee, we couldn't have asked for a better start of our year by talking about this very important subject. And going into our big skill shop, we do these webinars, our big skill shop in April. One of our partners just purchased 500 seats for people that want to learn and get into UX research and improve their skills. Our partner name is Analog. And so those tickets are open now on Eventbrite. Please go, send it to your friends, have them booked because they do close out early. We did have 5,000, I think, ticket sales the last time around, and we're looking to double or triple that. So make sure you get your seat before they go out. And companies are really doing a fantastic job at supporting growth in the UX community by buying out these tickets from us. And we reach out to many companies, and some of them are like, yeah, of course, we want more people to be engaged in this. So in closing, we wanted to thank you guys so much for bringing your knowledge. There are so many more questions here. We're going to we usually create a document trying to answer them all. Sometimes our speakers like answering them after the fact, and we do share them with everyone. Soon, what you're going to see after this is you're going to see a collection build for this webinar in particular. And that collection is called, the Stakeholder Engagement Collection from Theo, Marilee, and also Valerie. And that's going to help the community leverage what we just talked about and go deeper into learning. And hopefully that creates more creativity, that creates more knowledge in the future. So we wanted to thank everyone. We ran a little over. Maybe we need to make these longer, but we ran a little over. And from everyone from India to Australia, Spain, Virginia, Maryland, Ghana. We thank everyone for showing up today. So cheers.